The most feared Mafia boss on the Louisiana Gulf did not notice Delphine Vaughn because she was beautiful in the way rich men usually meant it. He noticed her because a tray shattered at her feet. 3 armed men reached for their guns, and she looked straight at him through the broken glass and said, "Relax. If I wanted to ruin your dinner, I would have started with the oysters." For 1 full second, the private dining room at the Copper Lantern went so quiet that Delphine could hear butter hissing in a pan behind the kitchen doors. The restaurant was never truly silent, not on a Friday night in New Orleans, not with jazz spilling softly from the front room, rain tapping the tall windows, and wealthy people pretending they did not see the men with hidden weapons standing near the exits. The Copper Lantern was famous for its candlelight, its velvet booths, its caramel bread pudding, and its ability to make criminals behave like gentlemen for at least 2 hours. Old families met there, judges drank there, men who hated each other smiled over gumbo there because the owner had one rule that even monsters respected: no blood on the dining room floor. Delphine had worked there long enough to know that rule was less about morality and more about cleaning costs. She stood beside a private table with cream sauce on her apron, a cracked plate near her shoe, and 6 dangerous men staring at her like she had insulted their mothers in church. Maybe she had. It was hard to keep track during double shifts. Her back ached, her feet burned. One curl had escaped her bun and stuck to her cheek. The black waitress dress pulled at her hips beneath the oversized apron she wore like armor. Someone at table 12 had already asked whether the pastry chef gave employee discounts by the pound. Someone at table 7 had laughed when she squeezed between chairs. Someone in the kitchen had called her sweetheart in that tone people used when they meant too big, too loud, too much. Delphine had smiled through all of it because rent did not care about dignity, and Junie needed new shoes before school started. But the man at the head of the private table did not laugh. Sloan Marchetti sat beneath the low amber light, with one hand resting beside an untouched glass of red wine. He was younger than Delphine expected, and colder than any man had a right to be in a city this humid. His black suit fit like it had been threatened into perfection. His dark hair was brushed back. His face was sharp, quiet, almost handsome, in a way that made people nervous instead of comfortable. He did not move much. He did not need to. The room bent around him anyway. Delphine knew who he was. Everyone at the Copper Lantern knew. Sloan Marchetti, head of the Marchetti family, owner of half the docks through companies with clean names, enemy of men who disappeared after thinking they were clever, brother to a young woman named Cora who sat beside him in a pale green dress and looked far too bright for the room she was in. Sloan's men watched doors. Cora watched the dessert cart. Sloan watched Delphine. Not like the others watched her. That bothered her. Most men looked at Delphine and made their decision fast. Too round, too sarcastic, too working class, too tired. Good for carrying plates, not worth remembering. Some were cruel out loud. Some were polite with their eyes. Delphine had learned to survive both. She had learned to make jokes before anyone else could. She had learned that if she laughed first, people sometimes mistook the wound for confidence. But Sloan Marchetti looked at her like she was a puzzle someone had placed in front of him without permission. One of his men, a thick-necked guard with a scar across his eyebrow, stepped forward after the tray slipped from her hand. "Watch yourself." Delphine bent slowly, picked up one large piece of plate, and placed it on the tray as if she had all the time in the world. "Thank you. I was planning to juggle the knives next, but your concern has changed me." The guard's jaw tightened. Cora made a small sound into her napkin. It might have been a cough. It might have been a laugh. Sloan's eyes shifted to his sister, then back to Delphine. "Bishop," he said. One word. Calm. Soft. Enough to make the guard step back. Delphine collected the last of the broken plate, keeping her face pleasant because she had worked in restaurants long enough to know that pleasant could be a weapon if sharpened properly. I'll bring another serving, and perhaps a new tray. This one has decided to retire." Cora smiled openly this time. "I like her." "No, you don't," Sloan said. Cora tilted her head. "You don't get to decide that." "I often do." "That must be lonely." The men at the table all suddenly became very interested in their glasses. Delphine looked down to hide her own smile. She had met rich families that smiled like knives and poor families that fought like storms, but she had never seen anyone tease a mafia boss in front of his soldiers and live through dessert. She liked Cora immediately. That was unfortunate, because Delphine tried very hard not to like people who belonged to rooms like this. Liking led to caring. Caring led to staying late, saying yes, taking blame, and ruining your whole life because you believed the wrong person deserved saving. She knew that better than anyone. Years before, Delphine Vaughn had not worn aprons. She had worn blue scrubs and comfortable shoes, and a badge clipped near her heart. She had known how to read monitors from across a room. She had known which patients were scared before they admitted it. She had known how to start an IV on a shaking child, how to calm a furious father, how to hear the difference between panic and danger in a patient's breathing. Nurses were supposed to notice things. Delphine had been very good at noticing things. Too good. Dr. Augustus Lindquist had been beloved by donors, respected by boards, photographed beside governors, and wrong about a medication dose on a rainy Tuesday night. Delphine had seen it. She had questioned it. She had been told she was tired, emotional, overstepping, confused. Then a man died, records changed, and somehow the error became hers. Lindquist kept his hospital wing. Delphine lost her license, her savings, and almost every friend who had once said they believed in her. People loved truth, until truth made important men uncomfortable. So now she made praline cream, carried hot plates, and came home smelling like sugar and grease, to a daughter who thought her mother could fix anything because Delphine had not yet found the courage to tell Junie that some things stayed broken for years. "Miss?" Cora's voice pulled her back. Delphine turned with the replacement entree balanced on a fresh tray. "Yes, ma'am." Cora had gone still. At first, Delphine thought it was the candlelight playing tricks. The young woman's smile had faded, but not into annoyance. Her fingers pressed lightly to her throat. A small red flush crept up her neck beneath the strand of pearls at her collarbone. Delphine stopped walking. The room continued around her for half a breath. Forks, rain, jazz. A waiter laughing somewhere near the bar. Then Cora coughed. Not a normal cough. Tight, thin, wrong. Delphine set the tray down on the nearest service stand. What did she eat? Sloan looked at her. What? What did she eat? Delphine was already moving. Bishop stepped between them. Back up. Delphine did not slow. Move. His eyebrows lifted as if no woman in an apron had ever used that tone with him and survived the experience. You don't give orders here. Cora coughed again, harder this time. Her hand curled around the edge of the table. Her lips were losing color. Delphine's whole body changed. Later, Sloan would remember that moment more clearly than he wanted to. 1 second, she was the sarcastic waitress with sauce on her sleeve. The next, she was someone else entirely. Her shoulders squared, her eyes sharpened. The exhaustion dropped away like a coat she no longer had time to carry. I said move, Delphine snapped, unless your plan is to glare the swelling out of her throat. Sloan stood so fast his chair struck the wall behind him. Cora? His sister tried to answer. Only a strained sound came out. Delphine pushed around Bishop and reached Cora's side. Bishop grabbed her wrist. She looked down at his hand, then up at his face. She is going into anaphylaxis. If you slow me down again, I will make you explain to him why his sister died while you were busy being large. Bishop released her. Sloane's face went still in a way that made the candle flames seem nervous. Delphine ignored him. Fear could come later. Fear was for hallways and bathrooms and quiet drives home. Fear was not for emergencies. Emergencies needed hands. Emergencies needed voice. Emergencies needed someone willing to be disliked for being right. Does she have an auto-injector? Sloan turned to one of his men. Her bag. The man stared. Her bag. Delphine barked. Now. 3 men moved at once and nearly collided. Cora wheezed. Her fingers clawed at her throat. Delphine crouched in front of her. Look at me, honey. Don't fight for words. Save the air. Cora's frightened eyes locked on hers. That's it. You're doing fine. I know it feels like your body is betraying you, but we're not letting it win tonight. Nod if you have a shellfish allergy. Cora gave the smallest nod. Delphine's gaze cut to the table. Oysters untouched, shrimp removed. The salad dressing looked safe. The garnish on the fish was wrong. Not parsley. Not exactly. A pale dusting clung to the lemon butter at the edge of Cora's plate. Ground shrimp powder, maybe. Cross-contact, or worse. No time. Auto-injector, she demanded. One of Sloane's men thrust a small case toward her with hands that shook, despite the pistol beneath his jacket. Delphine ripped it open. Sloan. His eyes snapped to hers. She did not call him Mr. Marchetti. She did not lower her voice. She did not ask permission. Behind her. Support her shoulders. Do not squeeze her. Do not panic in her ear. If you pray, do it silently. For the first time since he entered the copper lantern, Sloan Marchetti obeyed someone without hesitation. He moved behind his sister, one arm steady behind her back. Cora leaned into him, gasping, terrified. His face remained controlled, but Delphine saw the truth in his eyes. It was not weakness. It was worse. It was helplessness. Powerful men hated helplessness more than pain. Delphine pressed the injector against Cora's thigh through the silk of her dress. Small sting, sweetheart, then we breathe. The click sounded impossibly loud. Cora jerked. Sloane's hand tightened against the chair, but not on his sister. Good, Delphine said. Good. Stay with me. She's still struggling, Bishop said. Because medicine is not magic, Delphine said. Call emergency services. Say anaphylactic reaction, epinephrine administered, breathing compromised. Tell them to come through the side entrance, not the front, unless you want half of New Orleans filming this through dessert. Bishop looked at Sloan. Sloan did not look away from Cora. Do what she says. Delphine grabbed a clean napkin and checked Cora's mouth, her breathing, the swelling, the color of her skin. Her old training moved through her hands, like it had been waiting under the surface all this time, patient and furious. She had spent years telling herself she was not a nurse anymore. The state board had agreed, the hospital had agreed, the headlines had agreed, but bodies did not care about paperwork. A closing airway did not ask whether a license was still active before needing help. Do you have a second injector? Delphine asked. In the car, Sloan said. Get it close. Don't use it unless I say. She glanced toward the kitchen doors. And someone find out exactly what touched her plate. Quietly. No screaming at the cooks. Panic makes people hide mistakes. Sloane's gaze flicked to Bishop. Bishop left. Cora's breathing hitched again. Delphine rested one hand near her wrist, counting the pulse. Too fast. Thready. But there. She kept talking, low and steady, letting Cora follow her voice, instead of the terror in her throat. There you are. Stay with me. I know. It feels awful. You're allowed to be scared. Just don't leave the room to prove a point. Cora made a tiny sound that almost became a laugh, and failed. Sloan looked at Delphine, as if that broken little sound had done something to him. Outside the private room, guests had started whispering. The copper lantern's owner appeared near the curtains, pale and frozen. probably calculating whether a Mafia princess dying over the fish course would end his business or merely make it famous. Delphine did not have room in her head for him. She had room for Cora's pulse, Cora's airway, the timing of the injection, the ambulance, the possibility of a second dose, the way Sloan's men kept hovering too close because they were trained to protect through force, and force had no use here. "Everyone step back except him," she said. No one moved. Delphine looked up. "I am not decorating the room with suggestions. Back up." Sloan's voice came quietly from behind Cora. "Give her space." The men stepped back. There it was. The strangest thing Delphine had ever seen. Men who would probably shoot someone in an alley before breakfast were obeying a fat waitress with a stained apron because their boss had decided her voice mattered. No, not decided. Recognized. That was worse. Recognition was dangerous. It made a person visible. Delphine had spent years becoming invisible on purpose. The paramedics arrived through the side entrance 7 minutes later. One of them was young, broad-faced, and sweating from the rain. He pushed through the curtain with a medical bag in hand, then froze when he saw Delphine kneeling beside Cora. "Delphine," she looked up. For a second, the private room disappeared. She was back in a hospital hallway with fluorescent lights overhead and trauma alerts echoing through the walls. Tristan Bell had been 19 when he shadowed her on night shift, all nervous hands and big dreams. He had once fainted after his first arterial bleed, then returned 10 minutes later with a granola bar and an apology. Delphine had taught him how to slow down, how to listen, how to trust his own eyes. Now he stared at her like he had found a ghost carrying plates. "Tristan," she said softly. His shock broke fast. Good paramedics knew when memory had to wait. He dropped beside Cora. "What happened?" "Anaphylaxis. Epinephrine at 8 minutes ago. Severe respiratory involvement. Shellfish allergy. Possible contamination or deliberate exposure. But treat first." He nodded. "Already working. You always did give the cleanest handoff." Delphine looked down. Sloan heard it. Of course he did. He heard the respect in Tristan's voice. He saw the way the younger medic made room for Delphine instead of pushing her aside. He saw the way Delphine's hands withdrew only after she was sure Cora had been transferred safely into care. He saw, with the cold attention that had made him feared across the gulf, that the woman everyone had dismissed had been the only competent person in the room. Cora was taken out on a stretcher, breathing but pale, one hand gripping Sloan's sleeve until the last possible second. Sloan walked beside her to the service corridor, then stopped before stepping into the rain. He turned back. Delphine stood near the ruined table. The candles still burned. The fish had gone cold. One of the linen napkins lay on the floor, marked with a smear of her lipstick from when she had wiped Cora's mouth. Her apron was stained. Her hair had fallen looser around her face. The room smelled of lemon butter, fear, and something sweet burning in the kitchen. "You," Sloan said. Delphine lifted her chin. "Me?" His eyes narrowed slightly. "What are you? Not who. What?" A tired laugh almost escaped her. "Tonight? Underpaid." His gaze did not soften, but something in it shifted. "Tristan knew you. A lot of people know a lot of people. New Orleans is a bowl with gossip floating in it. He called you Delphine. That is generally what people call me when they are not yelling for more bread. He respected you." Delphine picked up the broken edge of a glass and set it carefully on the tray, anything to avoid his eyes. "He's polite. He said you gave the cleanest handoff. Well, I do hate a messy handoff. Were you a nurse?" The question landed too close to the old wound, not on top of it, beneath it. Delphine's smile appeared, quick and sharp, the one she used when customers asked if she was sure she needed dessert samples for quality control. "I was a lot of things. And now?" Now I am a waitress who needs to get back to work before my manager decides saving a guest counts as an unpaid break. Sloan studied her for another second. Most people filled silence when Sloan Marchetti offered it. They rushed to explain themselves, flatter him, fear him, please him. Delphine did none of those things. She looked tired enough to fall asleep standing, and stubborn enough to bite anyone who suggested it. Cora may have died, he said. Delphine's expression changed before she could hide it. The sarcasm faded. What remained was softer and older. She didn't. No, because of you. Because she had her injector. Because Tristan arrived quickly. Because your men finally stopped trying to solve a medical emergency with shoulders. A faint line appeared between his brows. Do you always refuse thanks? Only when it sounds like debt. Sloan went very still. Delphine regretted the sentence immediately. Not because it was false, but because it was too true. Powerful people loved turning gratitude into a chain. Dr. Lindquist had done it with smiles. Charity boards did it with forms. Landlords did it with patience that expired the moment money ran out. Delphine had learned to inspect every offered hand for hidden hooks. Sloan's voice lowered. I did not offer debt. Good. I offered truth. She met his eyes then, and for the first time that night, something like unease moved through her. Not fear exactly. Fear was easier. This was recognition answering recognition, and she did not want it. Truth is expensive, she said. Yes, Sloan replied. It is. Rain tapped harder against the windows. Somewhere beyond the private room, a customer complained that the delay had ruined their anniversary. In the kitchen, someone shouted for fresh plates. Life kept moving with its rude little shoes over the edge of disaster. Delphine reached for the tray. Sloan took it from her hand. She blinked. What are you doing? Carrying broken glass. I have carried worse. I believe you. That quiet answer unsettled her more than any threat could have. She took the tray back anyway. Then believe I can carry this too. For a moment, he almost looked amused. Almost. It vanished quickly, swallowed by the colder expression he wore like a family crest. Delphine Vaughn, he said, as if testing the name. She did not ask how he knew her last name. Men like Sloan Marchetti probably knew the blood type of everyone who buttered his bread. Do not look into me, she said. His eyes held hers. That sounded like a warning. It was a favor. To me. To both of us. She walked past him before her courage had time to reconsider. Her knees felt weak only when she reached the kitchen. Rosa, the pastry lead, grabbed her by the elbow and whispered questions too fast to answer. The manager barked something about statements and liability. A line cook crossed himself. Someone else asked if the Mafia boss had killed anybody yet. Delphine washed her hands 3 times and still felt Cora's pulse under her fingers. At midnight, she took the streetcar home with a box of unsold biscuits balanced on her lap and rain drying at the hem of her dress. Her phone had 4 missed calls from the babysitter and 1 voice message from Junie asking if beignets counted as breakfast if you ate them after brushing your teeth. Delphine played that message twice before climbing the stairs to their small apartment. Junie was asleep sideways on the bed, 1 sock on, 1 sock missing, curls spread across the pillow like dark ribbon. Delphine stood in the doorway and watched her daughter breathe. The world was full of powerful men who could rewrite records, ruin names, poison rooms, and make innocent women vanish beneath polite lies. But here was Junie, warm and real and trusting. Here was the reason Delphine kept standing. Here was the tiny person who believed her mother's laugh was natural and not a shield hammered together from everything that had hurt her. Delphine sat on the edge of the bed and removed her shoes slowly, careful not to wake her. Her hands had only just stopped shaking when her phone lit up. Unknown number. She stared at it. No one called after midnight with good news. Not hospitals, Not schools, not landlords, not ghosts from old lives. The phone buzzed again. Delphine answered before it woke Junie. "Who is this?" A man's voice came through, calm and low and impossible to mistake. "Cora is stable." Delphine closed her eyes before relief could embarrass her. "Good. She asked for you? She is drugged and traumatized. Her judgment is questionable. She said you told death not to be dramatic. I may have phrased it differently." She laughed when she said it. Delphine looked toward Junie and lowered her voice. "Then she's doing better." Silence settled across the line. Not empty. Watching. "I looked into you," Sloan said. Delphine's relief went cold. "You had no right." "No." The answer came too quickly, too simply. It stole some of the anger from her before she could use it. "I did it anyway," he said. Her hand tightened around the phone. "Then you already know I'm not worth whatever story your head is making. I know Dr. Augustus Lindquist blamed you for a death he caused." Delphine stopped breathing. The apartment seemed to tilt quietly around her. The little lamp beside the bed, Junie's backpack near the chair, the biscuits on the counter, the life she had built from scraps after the old one burned. No one said Lindquist's name in her home. No one. Sloan continued, voice controlled but darker now. "I know records were changed. I know 3 people who questioned him were transferred, silenced, or paid off. I know you lost your license because a respected man needed someone disposable to carry his mistake." Delphine stood, moving away from the bed on instinct, as if the words themselves might touch Junie. "You don't know anything," she whispered. "I know enough to ask what you want done to him." Her throat tightened. There it was, the offer beneath the offer, the old dark magic of violent men. A problem had been named, so now someone had to bleed. Outside, rain slid down the window in silver lines. New Orleans glowed beyond the glass, beautiful and rotten and awake. Delphine thought of Lindquist's clean hands, his soft voice, the way he had looked at her during the hearing, almost sad, as if disappointed that she had forced him to destroy her. She thought of the years after, the jobs that vanished, the friends who stopped calling, the little apartment, the bills, the day Junie asked why Mummy did not work at the hospital anymore, and Delphine had said, "Because sometimes grown-ups have to change plans." She could have said yes. For one terrible second she wanted to. Then Junie turned in her sleep and made a small sound, and Delphine remembered who she still needed to be. "I don't want him killed," she said. "I did not use that word." "You didn't have to." Sloan said nothing. Delphine pressed her free hand against the kitchen counter. "I don't want him beaten. I don't want him dragged into some warehouse. I don't want some quiet threat made in my name so you can feel noble and I can feel dirty. If Lindquist falls, he falls where everyone can see him. With records, witnesses, truth, not fear." The silence stretched long enough for her to hear the old refrigerator hum. When Sloan finally spoke, his voice had changed, not softened exactly, deepened. "You would choose paperwork over revenge?" "No," Delphine said. "I would choose my daughter being able to ask what I did, and me being able to answer without lying." Another silence. Then Sloan said, almost to himself, "You are very inconvenient." Delphine laughed once, tired and quiet. "That has been mentioned." "I can help you. You can hurt people for me. That is not the same thing. I can do both. Try not to sound proud of that." For the first time, she heard something like a breath of amusement on the line. It was small and it disappeared fast, but it was there. "Then tell me how to help without becoming the villain in your story," Sloan said. Delphine looked back toward the bedroom, where Junie slept with one hand tucked under her cheek. She should have hung up. She should have blocked the number. She should have returned to her small, exhausting, ordinary life and let dangerous men stay in dangerous rooms where they belonged. Instead, she thought of Cora gasping for breath at the table. She thought of the garnish on the plate. She thought of Lindquist, whose charity events fed important people while his records buried inconvenient ones. She thought of Sloan Marchetti looking helpless for one honest second while his sister fought for air. And she understood with a soft, frightening certainty that the night at the Copper Lantern had not been an accident. It had been a door opening. Delphine did not know yet whether something waited behind it to save her or ruin her all over again. But she knew this. If Dr. Augustus Lindquist's name had reached Sloan Marchetti's mouth, then the past was no longer buried. It was waking up hungry. She took one slow breath and said, "If you really want to help me, Mr. Marchetti, then you are going to learn something that may cause you physical pain." "What is that?" "The legal system." Another pause. Then, very dryly, "I have enemies I fear less." "Good," Delphine said. "Then this should build character." And in the quiet kitchen, while her daughter slept and the rain washed the city clean enough to lie about morning, Delphine Vaughn felt the smallest impossible thing stir inside her chest. Not hope. Not yet. But something close enough to scare her. By morning, Delphine had convinced herself that the call had been a stress dream brought on by fear, exhaustion, and too much coffee from the Copper Lantern's kitchen. That was easier than accepting the truth. Easier than admitting she had spoken to Sloan Marchetti in her bare feet, in her tiny kitchen, while her daughter slept in the next room, and had somehow told the most feared man on the Gulf Coast that he needed to build character. Powerful men did not like being corrected. Dangerous men liked it even less. But at 6:45, when Delphine was packing Junie's lunch and pretending the peanut butter sandwich had not been made with the last 2 slices of bread, her phone buzzed on the counter. A message appeared from the unknown number. Legal system. Character building begins at 9. A second message followed before she could breathe. Do not skip breakfast. She stared at the screen for so long Junie leaned over her cereal bowl and asked, "Is the phone doing something weird?" Delphine turned it face down. "No, the phone is just being bossy." Junie nodded with the tired wisdom of a 6-year-old who already understood adults made no sense before coffee. "Tell it you're the boss." Delphine almost laughed. "I tried that once. It took it poorly." She should have ignored the message. She should have deleted it and walked Junie to school and gone to the restaurant and let the night become just another wild story the Copper Lantern staff would whisper about while polishing forks. But after she dropped Junie at school, after she kissed the top of her daughter's head and watched her hurry through the gate with her backpack bouncing, Delphine stood on the sidewalk with the phone in her hand and felt the past breathing behind her. Dr. Augustus Lindquist had been silent for years. His silence had been worse than threats because it meant he had suffered nothing. He still stood under bright hospital lights. He still gave speeches. He still touched grieving families on the shoulder and told them he understood pain. Delphine had told herself that survival was enough. She had told herself that Junie's breakfast, Junie's rent, Junie's clean socks, Junie's small warm hand in hers mattered more than clearing a name nobody wanted to hear. And that was true. It had to be true. But truth did not die because a woman got tired. It only waited. Sometimes it waited in locked records. Sometimes it waited in the mouth of a paramedic who remembered. Sometimes it waited inside a Mafia boss who had no business caring and too much power to be ignored. At 9 exactly, a black car pulled up beside the curb while Delphine was still arguing with herself. Bishop stepped out first. He looked even larger in daylight and even less pleased to see her. His scar twisted slightly when he frowned, which seemed to be often. He opened the back door without speaking. Delphine looked at the car, then at him. "Does it come with a trapdoor?" Bishop blinked. "No." "Hidden weapons?" "Yes." That was not comforting. It was honest. She sighed and got in because her curiosity had always been one of her more expensive habits. Sloan was not inside. Instead, Cora Marchetti sat in the back seat wearing sunglasses too large for her face and a soft scarf around her neck. She looked pale, tired, and very alive. Delphine's chest loosened so suddenly she hated herself a little for caring. Cora pushed the sunglasses up into her hair and smiled. "You look annoyed to see me." "I look annoyed by default. It saves time." Cora's smile widened. "I brought pastries." "You brought pastries to a pastry assistant?" "Yes, but these are apology pastries." Delphine looked at the white box on Cora's lap. "Did you bake them?" "God, no." "Then they are not your apology. They are someone else's labor in a box." Cora laughed, then winced and touched her throat. Bishop looked alarmed. Delphine pointed at him. "Do not hover. Hovering has never healed anyone." Bishop froze halfway into a protective lean. Cora whispered, "I adore you. That is probably the medication." They drove to a quiet office above an old law firm near St. Charles Avenue, where the building smelled like wood polish, rain, and money that had learned to speak softly. Sloan was waiting inside a conference room with a woman in a cream suit and gold-rimmed glasses. He stood when Delphine entered. That should not have mattered. It did. Men like him usually expected the world to rise for them. Sloan Marchetti stood for a fat waitress in scuffed shoes, and did it like the act cost him nothing. Delphine decided not to notice. Cora settled into a chair. Bishop remained by the door like a thundercloud with a radio. The woman in the cream suit offered Delphine her hand. Adeline Brooks. Her grip was warm, firm, and direct. Attorney. Not owned by him before you ask. Delphine glanced at Sloan. "Was that obvious on my face?" "It is obvious on every face that has sense," Adeline said. Sloan looked mildly offended. "I am standing in the room." "Yes," Adeline replied. "That is why we are all aware of the problem." Delphine liked her immediately. The conference table was already covered with folders. Some were thin and clean. Others were old copies with faded stamps and creased corners. Her name sat on the top of one file in black letters. Delphine Vaughn. License suspension. Incident review. Oxner Emergency Department. Just seeing it made her stomach twist. Her hands wanted to fold into fists, but she kept them flat at her sides. Sloan noticed. He seemed to notice too much. Adeline did too, but she was kinder about it. She closed the folder halfway. "We do not have to start with that one." Delphine swallowed. "Yes, we do." Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. "If we go around it, it becomes a monster. Open it." Adeline looked at her for one moment, then opened the folder. Sloan remained standing near the window, silent and still. Cora's expression softened. Bishop stared at the wall, as if trying very hard not to listen to a woman's ruined life spread across polished wood. The first hour was awful. The second was worse. Delphine heard her own past described in careful legal language. Medication order, rapid decline, documentation correction, procedural breach, nursing negligence, failure to escalate. Every phrase sounded clean. Every phrase was a lie wearing hospital shoes. Delphine remembered the patient's name. Mr. Harold Jennings, 68, retired music teacher. He had hummed while frightened. He had called Delphine nurse girl because he forgot names but remembered kindness. He had asked if his daughter was coming. Delphine had promised to check. Then Lindquist had ordered a dose that did not match the chart, and the world had narrowed to alarms, shouting, motion, and the terrible moment when Delphine understood the mistake was not hers, but would somehow become hers anyway. She remembered trying to speak. She remembered Lindquist looking at her with a warning hidden behind calm eyes. She remembered the hearing, the board, the way people who once praised her hands would not meet her eyes. Adeline slid one paper toward her. "This is the amended medication log." Delphine stared at it. Her name appeared beside the entry, her initials, her timestamp. Her stomach turned. "I didn't enter this. Can you prove that?" "Not from this copy." "Could you prove it from the original system data?" Delphine looked up. If it still exists, Sloan finally spoke. It exists. Delphine turned toward him. You don't know that. Men like Lindquist destroy obvious evidence and keep useful evidence. That is not a legal theory. It is a criminal one. Adeline lifted a finger. Unfortunately, he is right. Delphine hated that. She hated more that it helped. Adeline continued. We need original audit trails, untouched transfer logs, staff testimony, and a reason the board should reopen the case without thinking this is personal revenge. Delphine gave a dry little smile. It is personal. Yes, Adeline said, but law likes to pretend personal pain becomes cleaner when placed in a binder. Sloan looked at the folders as if they were insects. This process is intentionally slow. Yes, Adeline said. That is why violent men find it frustrating. I am not frustrated. Delphine looked at him. You have been glaring at a stapler for 10 minutes. Cora covered her mouth. Sloane's eyes shifted to the stapler, then back to Delphine. It is badly made. It's holding paper together, not running for office. Adeline smiled without looking up. This is excellent. If you two continue bickering, we may survive discovery. Sloan seemed ready to respond, but Delphine's phone buzzed. Junie's school. For one icy second, she thought something had happened. She answered too fast. This is Delphine. The secretary told her Junie had left her lunch in the classroom and cried because she thought her mother would be mad. Delphine closed her eyes. Tell her mummy is not mad. Tell her mummy once left her keys inside the refrigerator and has no moral authority. Cora laughed softly again. Delphine hung up and found Sloan watching her with an expression she did not understand. What? She asked. You change when you speak to her. She's my daughter. Junie. Delphine's eyes narrowed. Careful. Sloan accepted the warning with a small nod. I only meant the name suits her. You have never met her. No. Then it suits her because I said so. I was agreeing with you. Then do it less ominously. That should have ended the softness. It did not. Something settled in the room after that, quiet and strange. Delphine expected Sloan to ask questions about Junie, but he did not. He did not push into the one part of her life she had not offered. He simply sat down at last, rolled up his sleeves, and began reading the file Adeline placed in front of him, as if legal paperwork were an enemy he had decided not to shoot, only because Delphine was present. That was how the partnership began. Not with trust, not with warmth, with folders, bad coffee, and Delphine telling a crime boss that witnesses were not to be frightened, bribed, followed, cornered, visited after midnight, or spoken to by men named Bishop unless they were actively on fire. Bishop muttered that he was not that frightening. Cora patted his hand and said, You once made a valet apologize to the moon. Bishop said, He scratched the car. Delphine said, And I'm sure the moon learned its lesson. For the next week, Sloan entered Delphine's life the way storms entered New Orleans, suddenly, fully, and with everyone pretending they had been prepared. He did not come to her apartment. She made that rule clear on day one. He did not contact Junie. She made that rule clear twice. He did not send money, groceries, dresses, shoes, rent, furniture, private school brochures, or what he called basic security improvements, which included, according to Delphine, enough cameras to make the Virgin Mary feel watched. He objected to every rule. He followed all of them anyway. That was what made him dangerous in a new way. Cruel men ignored boundaries. Kind men sometimes tripped over them. Sloan studied them, like maps to a country he had never been allowed to enter. They met after her shifts at the back table of the Copper Lantern, when the restaurant was closed and the chairs were turned upside down on polished tables. Delphine brought leftover coffee. Sloan brought files. Adeline joined when she could, usually with a laptop and an expression that suggested all men were disappointing, but some were legally useful. Cora came twice, wrapped in soft sweaters, still recovering, still too curious for her own safety. Delphine reviewed charts until the numbers blurred. She found medication times that contradicted nurse notes. She found signatures entered when staff were not on the floor. She found patients moved between charity categories after donor calls. She found Lindquist everywhere, never directly dirty, always near enough to smell smoke. One night, near 2 in the morning, Delphine pushed a folder away and pressed her hands against her eyes. "I need sugar, or a new spine." Sloan stood immediately. What kind of sugar? That was not a royal command. That was a complaint. Complaints often reveal needs. She looked at him through her fingers. "That sounds like something a very expensive therapist would say right before billing you. My therapist quit. Imagine that. He said I resisted vulnerability. Did you threaten him?" "Not directly." Delphine shook her head and stood. "Stay there. I'll get cake." He followed her into the kitchen anyway, which she should have expected. Men like Sloan did not know how to stay where they were put. She cut 2 slices of chocolate Doberge cake from the staff tray and handed him one on a chipped plate. He looked at it. "This is dinner?" "No, this is emotional support with frosting." He took a bite and went still. Delphine watched him despite herself. "What? That is very good. Try saying it with less suspicion. Food this good usually asks something from me. Then congratulations. It only asks you to wash your own fork." He did wash it. Badly. She corrected him. He looked insulted by dish soap. That made her laugh, and the sound surprised both of them. It came out real. Not the sharp laugh. Not the restaurant laugh. Not the laugh she used when someone made a cruel joke and she needed the room to move on. A real laugh. Warm. Tired. Hers. Sloan looked at her like he had just witnessed something private. Delphine turned away too quickly and busied herself with wrapping the cake. "Do not make a face." "I made no face. Your silence has posture. I was only thinking. That must be alarming for everyone." He leaned one hip against the counter, still holding the wet fork. "You do not become smaller when someone looks at you. You become louder." She stilled. "That is not always a compliment. It was meant as one. People like me learn to fill the room before the room decides to crush us." She had not meant to say it. The word slipped out because it was late, because the kitchen was dim, because he had washed a fork like a man negotiating with a strange animal, because he kept looking at her, as if her body was not an apology he expected her to make. Sloan did not answer quickly. When he did, his voice was low. "Who taught you the room wanted to crush you?" Delphine wiped the counter. "Everyone, eventually." At the hospital charity gala 2 weeks later, the room was designed to crush people beautifully. Crystal lights, white orchids, champagne towers, a string quartet playing music nobody listened to. Doctors in tuxedos, donors in silk, smiling board members, New Orleans society floating through the grand ballroom of the Vasseur Hotel as if cruelty had never worn perfume. Delphine stood in front of a mirror upstairs and wondered whether it was possible to die from regret while wearing borrowed emerald satin. The gown had been Cora's idea. The fake date plan had been Adeline's. Sloan had only said it was useful. Delphine had told all 3 of them that undercover work was for thin women in spy movies and people without childcare problems. Cora had arranged the sitter. Adeline had arranged the invitation. Sloan had arranged the necklace currently resting against Delphine's throat, though she had threatened to swallow it if he described the price. The dress fit. That was the problem. It did not hide her. It did not apologize. It shaped itself around her soft stomach, full hips, wide arms, and deep curves like the fabric had no shame at all. Delphine had spent years choosing clothes that made her easier to ignore. This dress made ignoring her impossible. She hated it for 5 minutes. Then she looked again, and hated herself for liking it. Cora stood behind her, still pale but smiling. "You look incredible." Delphine adjusted the neckline. "I look like a dessert with legal problems. You look like a woman who is about to ruin a terrible man's evening." That helped. Sloan knocked once before entering, because Delphine had trained him well enough to fear doors. He stepped inside and stopped. Delphine saw the change in him before he controlled it. His hand paused near his cuff. His eyes moved over her, not quickly, not greedily, not with the lazy entitlement she knew from men who thought a woman's body became public once decorated. He looked at her like he had walked into a room and found the center of it had moved. Cora smiled to herself and escaped before Delphine could beg her not to. Delphine lifted her chin. "If you say I clean up well, I will stab you with this earring." Sloane's mouth almost curved. "I would not insult you with surprise." That stole every prepared joke from her mouth. He came closer, stopping at a respectful distance. "You look like yourself." Delphine swallowed. "That is not how this usually works." "It should be." She stared at him, annoyed by the warmth rising in her face. "You're supposed to say something dramatic and Mafia-like." "Very well." He offered his arm. "Anyone who insults you tonight will regret developing language." "Too much. I can adjust. Please don't." They entered the ballroom as if they belonged there, which Sloane did and Delphine absolutely did not. At least, that was what she told herself for the first 10 steps. Then she saw Lindquist across the room, silver hair, perfect smile. One hand resting lightly on the shoulder of a donor's wife. He looked exactly the same. That felt impossible. Years had carved pieces out of Delphine, but he remained polished, admired, untouched. Her fingers tightened around Sloane's arm before she could stop them. Sloane did not look down. He simply shifted his hand, covering hers for 1 second, not holding her in place, only reminding her that she could let go whenever she wanted. She did not. Lindquist saw her 20 minutes later. At first, his eyes passed over her with polite disinterest. Then recognition struck. It was small, but Delphine saw it. The blink, the pause, the quick recovery. Men like Lindquist never looked guilty. They looked inconvenienced by memory. He approached with his practiced smile, while Sloane spoke to a donor about port investments in a tone so polite it made the donor sweat. "Delphine Vaughn," Lindquist said. What a surprise. His eyes moved over her dress, then Sloane's arm. "You look very different." There it was, soft, careful. Cruel enough for her to feel, vague enough for him to deny. Delphine smiled. "So do you, Doctor." "But that may only be the lighting." Sloane made a sound that might have been a cough. Lindquist's smile tightened. "I heard you were working in hospitality now." "Yes, people still ask for help, and I still provide it. Fewer monitors, better tips. I always hoped you found peace after everything." Delphine tilted her head. "That is kind. I always hoped you found a conscience. We all grow in our own time." The silence around them changed. A few nearby guests pretended not to listen while clearly listening with their whole bodies. Sloane's hand settled lightly at Delphine's back, not pushing, not claiming, only there. Lindquist noticed. His eyes cooled. "Mr. Marchetti, I did not realize you knew Miss Vaughn." Sloane's voice was smooth. "Dr. Lindquist, there are many things you do not realize." "Is that so?" "Increasingly." Delphine almost stepped on his shoe to stop him from enjoying himself too much. Before Lindquist could answer, a tall, older man with a white beard and a cane joined them. Gerald Faust. Delphine knew the name from Sloane's files. Old Mafia money, old rules. A man who believed violence was tradition if spoken with enough dignity. Gerald kissed her hand without asking and let his eyes linger too long on her body. "This is the waitress?" he asked Sloane, amused. Delphine smiled sweetly. "And you must be the cane." "I assume the man is decorative." Sloane went completely still. Gerald's expression darkened. Then Cora appeared from nowhere, bright and dangerous in her own way. "Delphine saved my life, Gerald. Try to keep up." That was the first crack in the evening. The second came from the staff. Delphine had worried that the hospital workers would avoid her, either ashamed or warned away. Some did, but not all. A respiratory tech named Maribel touched her arm near the silent auction table and whispered, "I knew you didn't do it." A retired charge nurse squeezed her hand in the restroom hallway and said, "We were scared." "I'm sorry." An orderly named James slipped her a folded card with an old extension number on it and murmured, "Records basement moved everything after the audit. The original backup labels didn't match the report." Each tiny kindness hurt more than the insults. Cruelty she knew how to carry. Belated belief was heavier. It asked her to imagine that maybe she had not been erased completely. While Delphine charmed staff with memory and sugar, Sloan terrified donors with manners. He smiled rarely, spoke softly, and asked questions that made powerful men forget how to swallow. He never threatened, not once. Delphine watched him remember her rules. No intimidation, no violence, no disappearing witnesses. He bent his nature around her conditions with visible effort, like a wolf learning to pass through a church without biting the priest. Once, when a hospital accountant tried to leave after Sloan mentioned shell companies, Sloan glanced at Delphine across the room. She lifted one eyebrow. He sighed, turned back to the accountant and said, "Please." The word looked painful leaving his mouth. The accountant sat down. Delphine had to turn away before she laughed. Near midnight, Adeline's message arrived. Service corridor. Now. Delphine found Sloan already moving toward her. They slipped through a side door behind a floral wall and entered a narrow hallway smelling of bleach and warm bread. Adeline waited beside a service elevator with Cora, Bishop, and Tristan, who still wore his paramedic uniform under a borrowed suit jacket. Tristan handed Delphine a tablet. "You need to see this." On the screen was a scanned supply order from the night of Cora's reaction. The copper lantern had ordered no shellfish powder, no shrimp garnish, no allergy risk seasoning, but an outside catering supplement had been added to the private Marchetti meal under an emergency vendor code. Delphine enlarged the signature. Her blood went cold. Lindquist Medical Hospitality. Sloan's voice turned deadly quiet. His charity network supplied the contaminated garnish. Adeline nodded, through a subcontractor linked to Gerald Faust. Cora looked at her brother. Her face had gone pale again, but this time it was not illness. It was betrayal. "They did this to make you react." Delphine looked at Sloan and saw him understand the whole shape of it. Cora nearly dying. Sloan panicking. Sloan killing someone. Sloan proving to the old families that he was still ruled by rage. Sloan being pulled back into Gerald's world through blood. For one frightening second, the man beside her disappeared behind something cold and ancient. His eyes went empty. His body stilled. Bishop noticed and straightened. Cora whispered, "Sloan," but Delphine stepped in front of him before anyone else could. She did not touch him. She only stood close enough that he had to see her. No. His gaze dropped to hers. "They poisoned my sister. Yes. They used her to control me. Yes. Move, Delphine." Her heart kicked hard, but she did not move. No. The hallway seemed to shrink around them. Sloan Marchetti looked at her, as if no one had denied him this directly, and lived without regret. Delphine's voice softened, not because she was less afraid, but because fear did not get to drive. "This is what they want. They want the monster. Do not hand him to them gift-wrapped." His jaw tightened. "You think law is enough for this? I think truth will hurt them longer. Not enough. Maybe not for you." Her throat tightened. "But enough for me. And enough for Cora, if you let her be more than the excuse they used." That reached him, not gently. Nothing about him yielded gently, but something in his eyes returned from the edge. He looked past Delphine to his sister. Cora stood with one hand around her throat, where the swelling had nearly taken her life, and she shook her head once. Not begging, choosing. Sloan closed his eyes for half a second. When he opened them, the violence had not vanished. It had been leashed. Delphine knew what that cost him. She also knew it mattered that he paid it. Adeline let out the smallest breath. Bishop looked like he needed to sit down. Tristan muttered, "Well, that was healthier than my last family meeting." No one laughed, but Delphine almost did. Then the ballroom doors opened at the far end of the hallway. Gerald Faust stood there, with Dr. Lindquist beside him. Both men looked at the tablet in Delphine's hand. Neither looked surprised enough. Lindquist smiled sadly, the way he had smiled years ago before helping bury her. "Delphine," he said, "you always did mistake scraps for proof." Gerald's gaze moved from her to Sloan, cold and pleased. "Careful, boy. A waitress with a grudge is a poor compass for a family." Sloan took one step forward, but Delphine caught his sleeve. Just 2 fingers. Barely anything. Enough. Lindquist's eyes noticed the gesture. So did Gerald's. Their smiles changed, because they understood exactly what Delphine had feared. They had found something Sloan wanted badly enough to obey. And in that narrow service hallway, with music still playing beyond the walls and proof glowing in her hand like a match, Delphine understood that the fight had finally turned its face toward her. Not as a forgotten nurse. Not as a waitress. Not as a joke people made when they thought she could not hear. As a threat. Gerald looked her up and down, slow and dismissive. "You should have stayed in the kitchen." Delphine's fingers tightened around the tablet. The old pain rose, hot and familiar. Then she felt Sloan beside her, silent and burning, waiting, because she had asked him to wait. So Delphine smiled. It was not her customer smile. It was not her shield. It was something sharper. "Oh, Gerald," she said softly, "that is where women like me learn to use knives." For one breath, nobody in the service hallway moved. The music from the ballroom floated through the walls, soft and pretty, as if people in silk were still raising champagne glasses, while something ugly showed its teeth 10 steps away. Delphine stood with the tablet in her hand, and her heart beating too hard beneath the emerald dress Cora had promised made her look powerful. Gerald Faust stared at her as if she were a joke that had learned to speak back. Dr. Augustus Lindquist wore the same wounded smile he had worn years ago, the one that made people believe he was kind because they had never been the person standing under it. Sloan stood beside Delphine so still that the air around him felt sharpened. She knew he wanted to move. She could feel it, not because he touched her, not because he said a word, but because anger came off him like heat before lightning. Bishop's hand had shifted beneath his jacket. Cora's breathing had gone thin. Tristan looked ready to drag everyone into a stairwell and start triage for a war. Adeline Brooks, thank God, looked annoyed, which Delphine had begun to understand was her way of staying calm. Gerald's smile widened. "Knives," he repeated softly. "How charming. Is that what the kitchen staff is calling gossip now?" Delphine glanced at the tablet, then back at him. "No. Gossip is what people whisper when they are scared. Proof is what they keep pretending not to see." Lindquist made a sad sound. "Delphine, this bitterness is not healthy." And there it was, the old trick. Make pain sound like illness. Make anger sound like instability. Make truth sound like a symptom. Sloan took one slow step forward. Delphine touched his sleeve again before she could think better of it. Not hard, just enough. He stopped. Gerald saw it, and the delight in his eyes turned colder. "Look at that," he murmured. "The great Sloan Marchetti, taking orders from a waitress." Cora's face changed. "She saved my life." Gerald did not look at her. "And now she will cost your brother his judgment." Sloan's voice was very quiet. "Do not speak about my judgment while standing beside the man who helped poison my sister." Lindquist's smile thinned. "That is an emotional accusation, not a factual one." "Good," Adeline said, stepping forward with her phone in one hand and her calmest legal smile on her face. "Then you will be happy to know this conversation is being preserved for factual review." Gerald looked at her phone. "You recorded us?" "No," Adeline said. "I recorded myself entering a service hallway to discuss evidence. You gentlemen joined voluntarily and began making colorful remarks near an open device. It happens." Delphine almost laughed. It was a terrible time for joy, but the feeling rose anyway, bright and inappropriate. Lindquist's eyes sharpened. That will not hold. Maybe not alone, Adeline replied. But neither will your vendor logs, your false audit trail, your backdated medication entries, your donor routing sheets, or the original digital signatures currently being copied from a backup server you apparently forgot belonged to the hospital before your charity network swallowed it. For the first time that night, Lindquist's face changed completely. Not guilt, not fear, calculation. It passed quickly, but Delphine saw it. Sloan saw it too. Gerald's smile disappeared. You have no idea what you are stepping into. Delphine looked at him and felt something old inside her stand up straighter. She had been scared for years, scared of bills, scared of phone calls, scared Junie would need something she could not provide, scared she would run into someone from the hospital and watch pity crawl across their face, scared that if she spoke too loudly, people would remember the lie before they remembered her. But standing there, with Lindquist cornered and Gerald sneering, she realized fear had been living in her house rent-free long enough. Actually, she said, I do. I'm stepping into the part where important men find out the women they dismissed were taking notes. Lindquist's gaze moved over her body again, quick and cruel, searching for a place to cut. You always did overestimate yourself. Sloan's hand curled once at his side. Delphine saw it and stepped slightly ahead of him. No, she said. I underestimated myself because you trained a whole room to do it first. Her voice shook at the end. She hated that. Then she decided she did not. Brave did not mean steady. Brave meant staying even when the shake arrived. The hallway door behind Gerald opened again, and two of Sloan's men appeared. One was Nico, who had never liked Delphine and had made no secret of it. The other was Paulie, younger, nervous, and loyal mostly to whoever seemed most dangerous at the time. Nico looked from Gerald to Sloan, then to Delphine, and his mouth tightened. Boss, he said, we need to talk. Sloan did not turn. Not now. Yes, now. Bishop's head snapped toward Nico. Careful. Nico ignored him. His eyes went to Delphine with the same look she knew from customers, from managers, from hospital board members. Too much woman. Not enough power. Easy to blame. This has gone far enough. We've got old allies watching you walk around on a leash because some waitress got in your ear. Cora made a furious sound. Sloan slowly turned to face him. The hallway went colder. Nico swallowed, but he kept going because foolish men often mistook an audience for courage. Gerald is right. We don't put family business in courtrooms. We don't let lawyers decide what happens to people who poison us. And we sure as hell don't risk the Marchetti name because she wants her job back. Delphine felt the words land, but not as deeply as they once would have. Maybe because Sloan moved before pain could settle. Not violently. Worse, for Nico, publicly. Sloan faced his own men, with Lindquist and Gerald watching, and his voice dropped into a calm that made everyone listen. You think strength is making people fear the room you enter. That is easy. Any fool with a gun can do that. Nico's face flushed. Sloan continued. Delphine Vaughn walked into a medical emergency while armed men panicked. She saved my sister because she understood the body in front of her better than all of us understood power. She lost everything because a respected man needed someone smaller to blame, and she still refused to ask me for blood when I offered it. She has more discipline than you, more courage than you, and more honor than half the men who carry my name into rooms where they do not deserve it. No one spoke. Delphine forgot how to breathe. Sloan looked at Nico like he was looking at a closed door he had already decided not to open again. If you cannot respect that, you are not loyal to me. You are loyal to the version of me Gerald can control. Gerald's expression turned ugly. You ungrateful boy. Sloan finally looked at him. There he is. Gerald stepped closer. I built the road your father walked, and charged tolls after he died. I kept you alive. You kept me useful. The quiet words seemed to strike Gerald harder than shouting would have. Sloane's face did not change. You wanted me angry. You wanted Cora hurt enough to make me careless. You wanted Delphine dismissed, because men like you have survived for decades by deciding who matters before they speak. That ends now. Gerald laughed, but it had no warmth in it. You think a board hearing will end me? No, Sloane said. Your accounts will. Your frightened partners will. Your recorded arrangements with Lindquist will. The men you betrayed will. The families you taxed. The docs you lied about. The shipments you skimmed while telling old men you were protecting tradition. Gerald's cane tapped once against the floor. You would expose your own world? Sloane's eyes moved, for the briefest moment, to Delphine. The parts of it that deserve light. Lindquist tried to leave during that moment. It was almost graceful, a small turn, a quiet step. A man used to exits opening before anyone realized he needed one. Delphine saw him because nurses noticed motion at the edge of a room. "Doctor," she said. He stopped. She walked toward him with the tablet held against her chest. Sloane did not follow. That mattered. He let her cross the space alone. Lindquist looked at her with polite boredom, but she was close enough now to see the sweat near his temple. "You should have let me disappear," she said. "You should have let me work my shifts and make my cakes, and raise my daughter, and forget your name." His mouth tightened. "I gave you opportunities to move on. No, you gave me shame and called it mercy." His eyes flicked toward Sloane. "Be careful who you stand beside, Delphine. Men like him do not love, they acquire." The words were meant to hurt both of them. Delphine felt the sting, but she did not let it steer her. "Maybe," she said, "but tonight he has followed more rules than you ever did inside a hospital." That landed. Lindquist's face hardened, and for 1 second the mask slipped enough to show the man who had looked at a dying patient and chosen his reputation first. "You were nothing," he said softly. "You are still nothing." The hallway inhaled. Delphine smiled, and this time it did not shake. Then it should embarrass you when nothing ruins you. The weeks after the gala did not feel like victory. They felt like weather, heavy, hot, and full of pressure. Evidence did not become justice just because people finally saw it. Adeline worked like a woman, personally insulted by every comma in the hospital's filings. Tristan gave a statement, and then found 3 other paramedics who remembered strange delays in Lindquist's emergency response records. Maribel found archived staffing logs. James found mislabeled backup tapes in a storage room where the air conditioner leaked over boxes nobody important had opened in years. Cora gave her own testimony about the meal, the reaction, the vendor supplement, and Gerald's pressure on Sloane afterward. Sloane handed over financial routes that made Adeline stare at him over her glasses and say, "I am choosing not to ask how you obtained this." He replied, "Personal growth." Delphine told him not to sound so smug about evidence. He told her not to insult his healing journey. She laughed into her coffee and hated how much she had begun to look forward to his dry little remarks. But the danger did not vanish. Gerald struck first. 2 reporters published stories about Sloane's criminal connections and Delphine's troubled nursing history on the same morning. A hospital donor hinted that Junie's school scholarship fund could be affected by scandal. A man followed Delphine from the streetcar stop one night until Bishop appeared from nowhere and leaned against a lamppost like a nightmare in a black coat. Delphine yelled at Sloane for having her followed. Sloane said it was protection. Delphine said protection without permission was stalking in a better suit. He apologized so stiffly that she almost felt bad for him. Almost. Then he asked what kind of protection she would accept. That was the moment she realized he was trying. Not perfectly, not naturally, but really trying. They agreed on rides after late shifts, security near Junie's school without Junie knowing, and no one entering Delphine's building unless she asked. Sloane looked pained by the limits. He obeyed them anyway. Junie met him by accident 3 days before the hearing. Delphine had done everything she could to keep those worlds separate, but children and crime bosses both had a talent for appearing where they were not expected. Sloan was waiting near the copper lantern's back entrance, leaning against the black car, while Delphine finished a pastry order. Junie had been dropped off early by the sitter, still wearing her school uniform and carrying a paper crown made of yellow construction paper. She stopped in front of Sloan, looked up at him, and said, "Are you the scary man?" Sloan looked at Delphine, who had frozen in the doorway with a tray of lemon tarts. "That depends," he said carefully. "On what?" Junie asked. "On whether your mother is upset with me." Junie nodded as if this was reasonable. "She gets upset when people do dumb things. I have noticed. Did you do dumb things?" Sloan considered this with the seriousness of a peace treaty. "Historically, yes." Junie turned to Delphine. "Mummy, he's honest." Delphine sighed. "That does not mean we keep him." Sloan looked almost amused. Junie looked at him again. "Do you like cake?" "Yes." "Then you can maybe stay for a little bit." Delphine closed her eyes. The universe had no respect for boundaries. The hearing took place on a grey Thursday morning in a room that smelled like old paper, coffee, and nervous ambition. It was not grand. Delphine had imagined something larger, maybe because trauma made old moments cinematic. The room was plain: long table, state board seal, digital recorder, rows of chairs, men and women with folders. Lindquist sat on one side with attorneys who looked expensive enough to charge by the breath. Gerald was not there, but his absence had weight. Sloan sat behind Delphine, not beside her, because she had asked him to. She did not want the board seeing a Mafia boss as her shield. She wanted them to see her, Delphine Vaughn, former emergency nurse, mother, woman, still standing. Adeline sat beside her, neat and calm. Tristan sat 2 rows back. Amara Okafor, Delphine's former superior, waited near the aisle with her hands folded, older now, more tired, and unable to meet Delphine's eyes for long. When Delphine's name was called, the room seemed to narrow. For a second, she was back at the first hearing, listening to people discuss her as if she were not inside her own body. Then she felt something press into her palm. Junie's paper crown. Delphine had tucked it into her purse that morning without thinking. A small yellow crown with crooked stars drawn in purple marker. She held it beneath the table and breathed. Not for Lindquist, not for Sloan, not even for the license. For the girl who believed her mother told the truth, even when her voice shook. Adeline began with records. Not emotion, records. Original medication logs, timestamps, access data, entries made under Delphine's initials after she had already been removed from the medication station. Board members leaned forward. Lindquist's attorneys objected. Adeline answered with calm little blades. Tristan testified next. He spoke about Delphine's skill, her judgment, the night at the copper lantern, and the way she gave medical direction under pressure. She did what trained people do, he said. She assessed the patient, removed the obstacle, gave clear orders, and kept everyone calm. That is who she was when she trained me. That is who she still is. Delphine looked down, because kindness in public felt harder to survive than cruelty. Then Amara stood. That was when the room changed. Amara had been Delphine's charge nurse. She had been the one Delphine trusted most. She had also been the one who had stayed silent longest. Her voice trembled at first, then steadied. Delphine questioned Dr. Lindquist's order before the medication was given. I heard her. She escalated appropriately. After the patient declined, I was told the official review would focus on nursing procedure. I was warned that if I contradicted the attending's report, my department would face consequences. She swallowed. I did not protect her. I should have. Delphine's eyes burned. Amara turned toward her. I am sorry. It was not enough. Nothing could be enough. But it was real, and sometimes real things arrived years too late and still deserved to be received. Delphine nodded once, because anything more would have broken her open. Lindquist spoke last. Of course he did. Men like him liked final words. He sounded wounded, professional, deeply disappointed by the unfairness of being questioned. He said memory was unreliable. He said grief changed narratives. He said Delphine had always been capable but emotionally reactive under pressure. He said Adeline's evidence was incomplete, that Sloan's involvement tainted the investigation, that criminals were using a bitter former nurse to attack a respected institution. Delphine listened. Her hands stayed folded. Her breathing stayed slow. Then Adeline asked one last question. Dr. Lindquist, did you authorize Gerald Faust or any entity connected to him to provide an emergency catering supplement to the private Marchetti dinner at the Copper Lantern? Lindquist smiled faintly. No. Adeline placed one printed email on the screen. His face emptied. It was small. A single message. A vendor approval. His name. Gerald's associate. Cora's meal. Allergy notes attached. Delphine watched the board members read it. She watched Lindquist understand that the room was no longer his. Sloan could have stayed hidden behind that evidence. He did not. When called, he rose and walked to the front with every eye in the room turning toward him, in fear, curiosity, or disgust. He did not pretend to be innocent. He did not pretend his world was clean. He stated what his organization had discovered about Gerald's alliance, Lindquist's laundering network, and the pressure campaign meant to pull the Marchetti family back into illegal shipping routes Sloan had been trying to leave behind. His voice was calm. He admitted what he had to admit. He withheld nothing Adeline had marked as necessary. Delphine understood what that cost him. Powerful men survived by controlling what people knew. Sloan was letting light touch parts of his world because the truth needed a path wider than his pride. When he finished, one board member asked why he had chosen public testimony instead of handling matters privately. Sloan looked back at Delphine. Not long, just enough, because the woman harmed by this deserved truth in a room with witnesses. That was when Delphine nearly cried. The ruling did not come immediately. Nothing good ever seemed to arrive when called. Days passed. Reporters circled. Lindquist's hospital partners began stepping away from him with the sudden moral clarity of people protecting investments. Gerald's accounts were frozen. Two of his old allies vanished from public view and then reappeared through attorneys. Nico was removed from Sloan's inner circle. Paulie apologized to Delphine by bringing 6 boxes of cannoli to the Copper Lantern, and looking terrified, she might throw one at him. She accepted the cannoli. She did not accept the apology until he said the actual words. When the board finally announced its decision, Delphine was at home frosting cupcakes for Junie's class, because life, rude and holy, did not pause for justice. Adeline called first. Delphine answered with buttercream on her wrist. "Tell me fast, or I'm going to throw up into the sprinkles." Adeline's voice was softer than Delphine had ever heard it. "You were cleared." Delphine sat down on the kitchen floor. "Say it again. You were cleared. The suspension is being vacated. The board is restoring your nursing license. They are referring Lindquist for disciplinary action and criminal review." Delphine pressed the phone to her ear with both hands. The apartment blurred. Junie came running from the table. "Mummy?" Delphine tried to speak and could not. Adeline did it for her, loud enough through the phone. "Your mother won," Junie screamed. Not gracefully, not quietly. She screamed like joy had knocked over a chair inside her small body. Delphine started laughing and crying at the same time, frosting on her arm, daughter in her lap, phone slipping against her cheek. The world had admitted it. Late. Imperfectly, but out loud. She had been innocent. Sloan arrived 20 minutes later and did not come upstairs until she invited him. That detail mattered more than flowers, more than money, more than the sleek black car waiting at the curb. He stood in the doorway holding nothing. No gift, no grand gesture, just himself, severe and quiet, looking almost unsure for the first time since she had known him. Junie ran past Delphine and hugged his leg before anyone could stop her. Sloan froze. Delphine covered her mouth. "She does that when she's happy," she said. "I see." He looked down at Junie as if she were a rare and dangerous bird that had chosen his shoe. "Congratulations," he told her solemnly. Junie looked up. "Mummy won." "Yes," Sloan said. His gaze lifted to Delphine. "She did." Delphine's throat tightened. "We did." He shook his head once. "No, I helped. You won." That was the moment she understood he had learned the difference. Months passed, and New Orleans changed around them in ways small and large. Lindquist lost his hospital position first, then his license, then his friends, or at least the polished people who had pretended friendship while he remained useful. Gerald's alliance cracked under audits, arrests, and the beautiful cowardice of men protecting themselves. Sloan moved carefully, publicly, painfully, separating legal businesses from old rot. Not all at once, not like a fairy tale. Real change was slower and messier than speeches. Some men left, some fought him, some learned. Cora stayed close, volunteering anywhere Delphine allowed her and complaining that recovery was boring when nobody let her climb ladders. Bishop became the unofficial guardian of clinic supply deliveries and developed a deep suspicion of anyone who touched the label maker. Adeline pretended she was not emotionally involved and failed daily. The clinic opened in the lower ninth on a bright morning after a week of rain. It stood in a restored brick building with wide doors, blue shutters, and a sign that read, "Vaughn Community Health Center," in clean white letters. Delphine had argued about the name for 3 days. Sloan had not argued back. He simply placed the final paperwork in front of her and said, "It is yours in every way that matters." She told him she was not accepting charity. He told her it was not charity if she was in charge of the budget, hiring, policies, and his ability to enter the staff kitchen. She took the job because people needed care, because her license was back, because some wounds healed best when the hands that had been pushed away returned to work. She hired nurses who had been overlooked, assistants who spoke gently, and front desk staff who knew no one should have to dress rich to be treated with respect. On the first day, an elderly man brought tomatoes from his garden because Delphine had checked his blood pressure without rushing him. A mother cried in exam room 2 because someone finally explained her child's medication in words she understood. Junie sat at the reception desk with Cora and handed out stickers as if managing a kingdom. Delphine became Dr. Vaughn to no one because she was not a doctor and had no interest in pretending. She became Nurse Delphine again. That was enough. More than enough. The first time a patient called her that, she had to step into the supply closet and breathe through the ache of getting back a name she thought had been buried. Sloan found her there and did not enter. He stood outside the open door and waited until she looked up. "Do you need anything?" he asked. She wiped her face and laughed softly. "A spine, maybe. Yours seems functional. You flirting through inventory again. Badly, I assume. Tragically." He looked pleased anyway. Their love did not arrive as a rescue. Delphine would have rejected it if it had. It arrived in small permissions and repeated choices. Sloan asked before coming over. Delphine told him when he was being impossible. He listened more often than not, and when he failed, he apologized without turning the apology into a gift basket. He taught Junie chess and lost on purpose exactly once before Junie caught him and called him disrespectful. After that, he played seriously, and Junie bragged for a week when she trapped his queen. Cora became family in the loud, inconvenient way only Cora could, leaving sweaters in Delphine's office and calling Junie her tiny executive. Bishop learned to smile with half his face. Adeline kept threatening to retire and then taking on more work than anyone. On the evening of the clinic's first-month anniversary, Delphine found Sloan in the hallway, standing in front of the vending machine with his hands in his pockets and a look of quiet menace on his face. The machine hummed innocently. A bag of barbecue chips hung from a coil, caught on the edge, refusing to fall. Delphine leaned against the wall and watched him for several seconds. "Please tell me you are not trying to intimidate the snacks." Sloan did not look away from the machine. "It took my money." A terrible betrayal. There should be consequences. "It is a vending machine, Sloan. Then it should be simple to reason with." She laughed, and he finally turned toward her. The hallway was warm with evening light. Somewhere near reception, Junie and Cora were arguing about sticker placement. In exam room 3, a baby fussed. Outside, New Orleans moved loud and golden and alive. Delphine walked to the machine, bumped it once with her hip, and the chips fell. Sloan looked at the bag, then at her. Of course, she handed him the chips. Even Mafia bosses cannot threaten snacks into falling. Apparently they require negotiation. No, they require hips and timing. His gaze warmed in a way that still made her feel seen, but no longer trapped by being seen. "You are the only woman alive who can make me feel ridiculous and grateful at the same time." Delphine smiled. "That is a specialized medical service. We bill monthly." He stepped closer, stopping just before the space became a question. He always did that now, left room for her answer. It still undid her, sometimes, that a man raised on command had learned to wait, that he could have filled her life with force but chose patience instead. Delphine touched the front of his jacket, smoothing a wrinkle that did not need smoothing. "You know," she said softly, "when I first met you, I thought you were going to be a problem. You were correct. I thought you would ruin my life." His hand lifted slowly, giving her time to refuse, then settled gently at her waist. "Did I?" She pretended to consider. "You brought lawyers, criminals, scandal, reporters, your dramatic sister, that terrifying man by the door, and a building with my name on it. An unfortunate list. And cake sometimes. I know your priorities." She looked up at him, all humor softening into something quieter. "You gave me room to rise." Sloan's expression changed. Not much, but enough for her. "You gave me a reason to become someone who deserved to stand near you." Her heart moved painfully. "Don't get poetic. I'm tired. I will keep it brief. That would be new." His mouth curved. Then he bent and kissed her, with the same care he had learned everywhere else. Not taking, not claiming, asking, even after she had already answered. Delphine kissed him back in the hallway of the clinic that carried her name, with frosting still drying on her sleeve from the cupcakes Junie had demanded, with barbecue chips crinkling in his hand, with the past finally behind her but not erased. Not erased, because some scars became maps if a woman survived long enough to read them differently. At the end of the hall, Junie shouted, "Mummy, Cora says glitter is professional." Delphine pulled back and called, "Cora is banned from medical design choices." Cora shouted, "Coward!" Bishop muttered something about glitter being a security risk. Sloan closed his eyes, as if asking heaven for patience he had never earned. Delphine laughed. The sound filled the hallway, warm and real, and nobody in the room mistook it for armor. Not anymore. Years later, people would tell the story in cleaner ways. They would say a disgraced nurse exposed a corrupt doctor. They would say a mafia boss turned on the old guard. They would say a poisoned dinner at the Copper Lantern led to a scandal that changed half the city's hidden alliances. They would forget the buttercream, the broken tray, the vending machine, the little girl with the paper crown, and the woman in the emerald dress who told dangerous men that proof was sharper than fear. But Sloan remembered. So did Delphine. Love had not begun with rescue. It had begun with a dropped tray, a dying girl, a woman who refused to move, and a man powerful enough to destroy the world learning, slowly and painfully, that the bravest thing he could do was not take control. It was to stand beside her while she took her own name back.